Salute to South Africa with Chenin Blanc.
I'm Greg.
I'm Julie, and we're the Crafty Winers.
This is a new one for us again.
Yeah, it is. And it's not a real common one around here. I have to say that I have probably had Chenin Blanc maybe 2 or 3 times.
I haven't at all.
No, I think when we were in the wine club.
Maybe.
But I haven't seen it in the local stores.
That was over 5 years ago, so
Yeah, true.
I do not recall.
I'm pretty sure we had a couple of them. But so anyway.
We'll treat this like it's new.
Yes. So I always like to do a little bit of reading about the wines that we're going to do. So I have a few fun facts. Well, I don't know if they're fun, but they're facts. So Chenin Blanc is originally from France. I mean, the name kind of gives it away. It came from the Loire Valley, but it made its way to South Africa about 1655, according to Wikipedia. It was believed to be the first vine to be brought to South Africa. So basically it's...
Vine like je ne sais wine?
No, vine as in vine clippings. So it was the first grape to grow in South Africa, apparently. In 1659, the first grapes were harvested and pressed. They know this for a reason, I'll explain. The governor wrote in his journal on February 2nd, 1659, and I quote, "Today, praise be to God, wine was made for the first time from Cape grapes." So South Africa knows exactly when their first wine was ever made. Despite its French heritage, 55% of all Chenin Blanc is planted in South Africa, and just 30% of it is grown in France. And there's a little bit grown in the US too. I thought this was really interesting. It is considered an uneven ripening grape, which allows for many different styles. So you can have from really very bone dry to just slightly dry to even dessert wines. And it's more common to be a dessert wine if the berries undergo noble rot. So who would have thought that noble rot would be a good thing for grapes, but it's very susceptible to that, and I guess they discovered that it made good sweet wine.
So we don't know in this case if it did or not.
No.
I guess.
So I guess we'll find out. I kind of doubt that it's going to be a sweet wine, but
Well, we're going to do it dry, so.
that's true.
So what we came up with is a Cru International kit. All we're using from the kit is just the juice. The instructions went into the garbage, and the packet of chemicals went into our wine kit packet of chemicals stash that maybe we'll end up having to use someday. But what we're using is big ass bag of juice,
Oh my goodness.
enough to make 6 gallons. And this really wasn't expensive.
Did it come
I'll
from South Africa?
link it. Hey, doggies, you want a box to play with? Maybe.
They'll sniff
Probably
it.
not. Now that I've done that, I know I need the box back for the measurements. But yeah, this is enough to do 6 gallons of wine, and we're only doing 1. So I'm going to have to do a little bit of math to figure out how much of this we want to put into our measuring pitcher. So I will do that now. So it says right on here, 2.11 US gallons makes 6 US gallons of wine. So that means we want to take 2.11 times 128 to give us the ounces, and then divide that by 6 to get the ounces that we want to put in our pitcher.
Where'd you put your calculator?
Oh yeah, I have a calculator. This is not a tool we have on craftywiners.com/tools right now, but maybe it could be.
I suppose it could be.
So 2.11 times 128 is 270.08 ounces. That's how much is in the bag. And then we want 1/6 of that. It's 45 ounces, 45.01.
Okay, so
45 is close enough.
45 ounces.
So I'm looking at my measuring pitcher. So I know where 45 is. It's basically 2 ticks below 48. So I'm going to go ahead and pour that carefully into my pitcher.
And I wrote that down on our batch note so that we will know for the next time. And if you don't know about batch notes, they're super important, especially for me, because I can't remember what I did last week. And we have a ton of wines going on. So this basically keeps track of everything we've done with the wine, everything we've put into it, all the measurements. We keep a batch number so that if we love the way it turns out, we can completely recreate it again using this batch note. And we do have a video on that as well, which we can link for you.
This pitcher, as with all of our equipment, has been sanitized. And you can watch our sanitization video. We use Star San. I'm just going to double check myself. Yes, I would say that is 45 ounces. I'm going to remove as much of the air as I can from this now that I've already put the cap back on. Just so that this juice stays
good
a little bit longer. Because I don't know when we'll be making the next batch.
I guess that depends on how much we like it.
That it does. You can put it in the fridge just like this, but I'll put it back in the box because it holds shape better. It takes up a little bit less room when it's in the box, I've noticed. So I'm going to clear this off. Now we're going to add water to the 96 ounce mark.
And I ran out of the big bottles, so we're having to use little ones.
We're slumming it.
Yep. We had a lot of little bottles, though, so it's okay.
That gives us...
Why?
Because Brian on City Steading does it. I just don't do the crash sound. We let our doggies play with them.
I think he does it just to annoy me.
That's the second reason. So we go to 96 ounces because that's where we're going to take our hydrometer, and then we're going to use our tool on craftywiners.com/tools.
Our handy dandy tool.
To tell us how much sugar we need to add. That's just barely short of 96, so we may as well do one more. Do you like this one?
No, they're not interested in any way.
They're not interested in my games. So now that it's at 96, I need to mix it up real good with my power tool. You can find the link for the pumpkin gutter in the description below. Stirred up enough. We will take our hydrometer reading. And then Julia's going to go to the calculate needed sugar tool on craftywiners.com/tools. Spin the hydrometer to get the bubbles off. And we want this to be basically just because Alexa said the average ABV of a Chenin Blanc is around 11%, so that's what we want ours to be. We also don't want it to be much higher than that because our wines typically go ultra dry, so they end up having more alcohol than we really prepared or intended. And with a white wine, it's not always a good thing for us.
You can taste it more in a white wine.
So the gravity at 3/4 full is 1.116.
Okay, I will type that in.
Just typing that into the tool, and it'll tell us how much sugar we need to add to get to 11%.
For 11%, 75.
75% full is the...
Okay, so it's telling me that there's already too much sugar.
That's not terribly surprising.
You would have to take 1.28 ounces of sugar out.
Which we cannot do. We could dilute it, but we don't need to do that. So that's not a lot of sugar, so it's not going to be a lot over 11%. And that's actually a nice little addition that I could make to our tool. If our tool next to that saying that it had too much sugar told you what it would be right now, that would be a nice addition probably to our tool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
I changed it to 11.5, and that's pretty much
Okay, so right now it's going to be 11.5%. So we're not going to add any sugar. We're happy with that. We're not going to dilute it. That half a percentage is not going to ruin the wine.
Nope.
So I am not going to put this back into... Yes, I am. I'm going to put this back into our pitcher, and we're going to add more water.
Yes, we are.
We're going to add water to get it up to the 128 mark. Then I'll stir it up again real good. Oops.
I think you splashed the camera.
That would be my luck today. So now we're going to go ahead, now that it's at a gallon, we'll go ahead and get our initial gravity reading using a hydrometer, which you can find a link to our hydrometer video if you're not aware of how they work. So our initial gravity is, I think probably as kind of predicted, 1.090, which is, if you spin this around to see the potential alcohol, it's about 11.5%. Go figure.
Yep. All right. I wrote that down.
This time I'm not putting this juice back in there. We are going to put it into the measuring cup because we're going to add some stuff to it. Now, I think Crew International, the maker of the kit, filtered this juice because it
is really clear.
Super clear, so I don't see any need to put the pectic enzyme that we would normally put in there to clear fruit particles out. There are no fruit particles, so we don't need to waste the pectic enzyme.
Okay. But and we do want
Julie read
add
that this is one of the rare white wines that has
tannin.
Desired additional tannin.
You don't have to put it in, but it is apparently common.
So how much are you putting in?
A half teaspoon.
And then there is no reason to not right now go ahead and take the pH to see what we need to do there. And we can add whatever the ingredients are into the measuring cup we already have started to save ourselves a step. So we like to have our wines as close to 4 as we can to start fermentation. Before bottling, you want it to be in the mid-3s.
Yeah.
But for just the well-being of the yeast so that it's less likely to stall, we like to have it at 4 to start. And the pH naturally goes down as the fermentation goes on. So we probably won't have to adjust it again, but we might. But the pH right now is 3.4, which is a little bit low for me. So we're going to want to add some potassium bicarbonate to raise it up. Now, you don't have to do this. A lot of people think it's fine to start your fermentation below 4. And that's probably true. This is just how we do it. So you can do this or not. That's a nice little look. So she added the tannins and the 1/4 teaspoon of potassium bicarbonate.
It's drifting.
Yeah, and this is actually, I think the tannins that we use are actually wood shavings of some sort.
They are.
It's just nice and stirred up. We will see what our pH is now. She probably already wrote on there that we did add tannin since we don't normally do that to white wine.
And yes, and I wrote what the pH started as.
pH is 3.62 now, so we're going to have to add more. A little bit more.
Alrighty.
We added another 1/4 teaspoon of potassium bicarbonate, making a total of half teaspoon that we added. And the pH is now at 4.01.
Okay.
And that is perfect.
Perfect?
Perfect.
All right. Cool.
So, next we are going to put some of this aside, about 1/4. I don't think you need to.
Okay.
About 1/4 cup.
And
And
add.
now, a trick with this that she may or may not want to take advantage of
Oh, yeah, I could
is
do
we
that.
can warm this up, and it makes it.
Okay, well.
You want to warm this up before you put the yeast in anyway, but if it's warm, the Go Firm seems to dissolve a lot better.
And it does not dissolve easily, so I'm going to go heat this up for just a smidge.
She's going to put it in the microwave because we're cheating, because we're filming. Normally, we just put this next to a heater for a little while. That's exactly where this is going to go, but I'm going to put this into a carboy first because we are now done with our nifty measuring pitcher. So,
And I will go heat this up.
while she's heating that up, I will transfer this into a carboy. Okay, so the must, which is juice that we're going to ferment, is now in the carboy. I put a rubber stopper bung on the top, marble on it, just to keep anything from flying in it. And both of these are going to go next to, no, I take that back. This is going to go next to our heater to warm up to about 80 degrees. And this, she's ready now since she cheated and used the microwave to pitch the yeast.
Yep. But first, I put 2 teaspoons of Go Firm in here and stirred it up really well, and it actually mixed up better than it normally does.
If you don't have Go Firm and you don't have any interest in getting Go Firm, you can do this without. It just makes it a whole lot slicker process. It stalls less, goes drier, ferments quicker.
We've had really good success with it.
We're not Go Firm salespeople, but we really like it.
Kind of sounds like we are. And I am going to use Red Star Premier Blanc. Goes with Chenin Blanc. You don't have to use the whole packet. I just am.
Part of the reason we do is yeast is cheap, and
we have a
lot of varieties of yeast, and there's no telling when we're going to get back to one, and they do expire faster if they've been opened. And also, that if you look at the expiration date on that yeast, I can almost guarantee it is expired.
No, it's not.
Okay, well,
Some
of our Premier Blancs are expired by a month or so, which is still okay most of the time.
We have till June of next year.
Since we're pitching this yeast first and we're going to let it sit out for 2 hours, we'll know if the expiration is a problem because it won't start foaming up. So that's part of the reason we do it the way that we do as far as letting this sit out in a warm area for 2 hours before we put it in here. Because if the yeast is dead, we're gonna get new yeast before we put it in here.
And I am not stirring this, and I'm not playing with it. I'm doing this on purpose. I'm just dunking it a little bit just to get the yeast kind of incorporated in what.
Make sure that they know that there is liquid below them.
Yes. It's time to swim, guys.
And sink is fine.
Okay.
So we are going to let this sit for about 2 hours. We're not going to come back on camera until after this is fermented because this is a pretty easy thing. You're going to let this sit for about 2 hours and be nice and foamy. You're going to pour it into your carboy. Take the marble off if you used a marble. Otherwise, put a rubber silicone blow-off tube of some sort or at least an airlock. White wines typically at lower temperatures, we do this at 60 degrees. Most of the time, they're not going to foam up enough to come out of the tube. Very rarely do they come out of the top of the airlock.
Yeah.
We still always use a blow-off tube.
Just habit.
So, a blow-off tube, let me grab one and you'll see what it looks like. This is a silicone tube that is just big enough to fit into the top of the hold bung. Put it in really tight so that it's not going to fall off. And then usually I use a twist tie to go around the handle and around the top of the silicone tube just to make sure it doesn't blow out. And then this is going to sit for about 6 days. And on the 6th day, I'm going to degas it using our food saver, and I'll show you that in a bit. We are going to add 1 teaspoon of Fermento, and then I'm going to use our aeration wand to add oxygen back in for 3 minutes. So degas 3 minutes, 1 teaspoon of Fermento, aerate for 3 minutes. And then it'll sit for a couple more weeks until it's done. Sometimes I'll add another 1/4 teaspoon of Fermento on around the 12th day. Depends on whether it's really close to being done at that point or if it looks like it needs to go further. So tell that by taking a hydrometer reading. If it's still at 1.06 or so on that day, then I'll probably add a teaspoon of Fermento just to make sure that it gets across the finish line.
And if you guys don't have an aeration wand, you don't need one. They're cool and they work really well, but I'll just take the stopper out and swirl it about 50 times or so.
Yeah, swirl it well. That degasses it and incorporates oxygen in it too. It's just a little more manual than I like to be. So
I kind of like it.
I like my tools.
The hands-on swirling.
So we will be back after this is fermented. I will show you when we come back. I will show you the aeration wand and the food saver, just so you're aware. So that was on the 15th of June. On the 20th of June, I used our food saver for 3 minutes. Got attachments that go right into the top of the whole bung. Degassed it for 3 minutes. I added 1 teaspoon of Fermento. And then I used this aeration wand to add pure oxygen in for 3 minutes. And you can watch our oxygenation CO2 management video to see how to use these. The times on the video are a little bit different. I'm doing them for a lot less now because I found that it's just as effective, if not more so, to do it 3 minutes instead of 10 minutes. So I'm going to clear these out of the way and we will get started racking. So our final gravity ended up being 0.993. Using our tool at craftywiners.com/tools for calculate ABV gives us a final ABV of.
Drum roll, please.
Don't do a good drum roll, so I'll just add the effect.
13.47.
Yeah, it's a little higher than we wanted because
it is.
We just rolled with the sugar that was already in here. So because it went so far below 1.000, we got bonus alcohol. No extra charge.
Well, like I was saying, these grapes tend to have a lot of sugar in them already, so.
They did.
Yeah.
So we're going to transfer this from the fermenter into our wide mouth 1 gallon jar where it's going to live for a while. And we'll be back. Okay, so at the end, when it starts getting shallow, I don't want my auto siphon to run out of juice. So I tilt it to keep it deep for as long as I can and try to keep there from being any of this lees going into the auto siphon. Also, when I did my degassing and oxygenation on this 5th day in this case, I also took the blow-off tube off and put a regular airlock on. That's a good reminder, visual cue when I look at my wines that step needs to still be done. And we just lost our...
Yeah, we lost it.
Juice siphon. And I think that it's a lost cause now. So we lost a little bit, unfortunately, due to siphon malfunction. But not very much. This is a lot easier to do when it's below you than above your heads, but we were trying to demonstrate it to you, so I'll blame it on you guys.
It's your fault.
I'm going to clear this stuff off. Okay, so we got a little breathing room. We're going to take the pH before we taste it. Oh
because if we have to adjust it, it can change the taste a little bit.
Oh my.
What is oh my?
So as I mentioned earlier, the pH typically drops during fermentation, and we started this at like 4.01, right?
Yeah.
It's 3.09. It's gone down almost a full point.
Holy moly.
Which, the way pH works, that's 10 times. It's a 10 times change. So that's a pretty drastic, but we do expect it to change. I didn't really expect it to change this much. So this is highly acidic. I don't know, did you see in your research what Chenin Blanc usually is?
Well, it did say that it is known for its acidity.
Okay, well, I can see why. This is not, just because ours is this acidity, because we did adjust it, doesn't mean that they are all like this. So, we know what we want it to be typically before we bottle it, which is going to be 3.5 to 3.7 or so. Lower is fine as long as it tastes okay. Julie Googled it, and the range typically for this varietal of wine is
between 2.9 and 3.8. That's a very wide range, but
we're on the lower end of that.
Most winemakers prefer 3.0 to 3.5.
So we're in that range too. Again, towards the lower end of it. Let's see what it tastes like, and then we can decide if we think we need to take some of the acid out. And we're drinking red wine. We're drinking.
Yeah, this is switch.
We're drinking coffee Merlot, our recipe.
Yeah, it is definitely on the acidic side.
Is it too acidic? I don't think it is, just based on going from Merlot to white, but try it again. And we don't need to finalize the pH now either. We've got time before we bottle. I'd say leave it myself, but
I don't. It makes my cheeks pucker a little.
Well, you're drinking Merlot.
True.
That is not sour.
I guess we can let it sit for a while and taste it again.
I think in this circumstance, we're better off to not make a decision on that right now. We have probably 3 to 4 weeks before we bottle this.
We have plenty of time.
So we may want to raise it a little bit, which is going to make it less sour, less acidic. But I think we would need to start this out fresh without having been drinking Merlot.
Coffee Merlot, especially.
To do that. So let's move on. Okay, so we have this particular order that we need to do this first ingredient. If you haven't watched our videos before, we have chiasosol and chitosan that work on negative and positively charged particles and should not be added at the same time. So we let the chiasosol work for at least an hour before we add the chitosan. So what I'm doing right now is taking out approximately a quarter cup before we put the chiasosol in there so that there isn't chiasosol in this batch.
I'm going to put 1/8 of a teaspoon of chiasosol.
Which is very, very, very little.
In here. It's just a tiny drop.
Then I'm just going to use my sucky thing.
I've got you saying it now. Your sucky thing.
So much easier to say than turkey baster.
I don't know.
Gently stir. You don't want to introduce oxygen now anymore. The oxygen days are over. Hopefully, for this wine. So now we'll let this sit for an hour. In reality, we're not going to because we're filming, but you should. Let this sit for an hour before you add the other ingredients that we're going to be adding. But she's going to add it to the sample that we took out.
And stir it all up.
And we can have it all ready, and then in an hour, we will add it.
So I'm going to put a teaspoon of chitosan, quarter teaspoon of bentonite.
Chitosan, again, is the opposite of chiasosol. It takes the positive charge particles out to the bottom. Bentonite is a clay that also attracts some particles.
And then our potassium
all of these
sorbate.
They're all optional, but recommended. The potassiums will keep any new fermentation from starting back up should we back sweeten this. If you have no intention of back sweetening and you don't think anybody you're going to give it to is going to add sugar to it and put it away, you can skip the potassiums. We are likely going to do something to this. She's been putting a lot of fruit into our white wines.
I've been experimenting.
So fruit has sugar of any kind that you add to this, if it's fermentable sugar like fruit sugar is, could start this fermenting. And if it's in a bottle, you might have an unexpected issue.
I think it's summertime. Makes me want fruity wines. It's 105 degrees outside right now.
I don't think we've made a wine so far in the last couple of months that she didn't add some kind of fruit to. Peaches, pineapple, something.
Blueberries. In our Riesling.
Yeah, it became a blue Riesling.
Yeah, it's really cool.
So again, don't add this with the Cheetos bentonite, potassium sorbate, and potassium metabisulfite until the quesosol has sat in here for an hour. But we're not going to do that because we're filming. You really can, if you look at this now and then don't look at it for an hour and come back and look, you will see a difference with just the quesosol. It is effective. So we are muting that by adding this now. But otherwise, we end up with issues with storing video that has nothing but an hour of
Us waiting.
us sitting here staring at. So at this point, a lot of times, and possibly this time, I will get my food saver back out and try to suck up a little more of the CO2 that I can tell is in here.
Yeah, there's
I
a
can
little
tell it's in
bubbling.
here because when I stir this, I can see bubbles coming up.
Yep.
So I will probably take my food saver and run it for 5 minutes or so on this. The other thing that you can do if you don't want to use a food saver, don't have a food saver, is just keep stirring. 15, 20 minutes later, you'll probably do the same effect of 3 minutes of my food saver. But
Just
you
keep
do want to get the CO2 out. It's not crucial. Time will definitely remove the CO2 as well. But I like to be ahead of the curve and get some of it out now. It's got to be out before you bottle.
And you can stir with a spoon instead of the sucky thing. We just didn't have a spoon out.
I can see clay spinning around.
Yeah, that's the bentonite. It's good though.
So I will now, after I degas this, what we usually do is put the lid back on, put a marble on top so that this isn't as tall as it would be with an airlock, because the airlock really doesn't do a lot of good anymore.
And it won't fit in our fridge.
You do want the CO2 to be able to come out, but a marble doesn't keep the CO2 from coming out. The marble keeps creatures from crawling in the hole. But then I'll put this in the fridge and let it cold crash at 34 degrees for, in this case, probably a couple weeks before we look at it again. And then we will decide if we want to
Lower the or raise the pH.
Well, I'm going
Maybe.
to take some of that back. We probably won't wait a couple of weeks before we decide what to do with fruit.
Or the pH.
That will probably be in the next week or so, and then it'll sit with the fruit in it for probably a couple of weeks. But you don't want to add fruit until this is sat for at least 24 hours so that the potassium sorbate and metabisulfite do their thing.
Yeah.
If you add it immediately afterwards, the fermentation could start back up again. So I think that is it for this video.
Well, okay. So thank you for watching our video on Chenin Blanc. It's our salute to South Africa. I hope you liked it. If you did, please click the like button, click the subscribe button, leave comments, questions. Let us know if you made it and what you thought about it and how it turned out, and if you did anything fancy to it, like add fruit. We'd like to hear about that too. Thank you for your support, and until next time, cheers!